Hi, everyone. It's Kali Arevalo, editor of Institutional Investing and Infrastructure. Today, with me is Claire Broido Johnson, the co-founder and president of Sunrock Distributed Generation. We're going to talk about the outlook for renewable and distributed generation today. Great topic. But first off, Claire, just thanks for being here. Do you want to add anything about your role or the company before we start?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. My name's Claire Broido Johnson. I'm the president and co-founder of Sunrock Distributed Generation. We finance, maintain, provide asset management for solar and storage projects all over the United States, typically between 150 kilowatts and 5 megawatts. My co-founder, Wilson Cheng, and I are very interested in the messy middle, so the sort of 150 kilowatt to 5 megawatt project that has been historically sort of under invested in because lots of investors are interested in much larger projects. We find that they have much higher returns because there is not as much competition for those projects. And we have an underwriting mechanism by which we can get comfortable with folks and companies that do not have a credit rating. And that historically has been a main reason why small manufacturing facilities, mom and pop grocery stores, gas stations, houses of worship, community centers have not been able to get financing for power purchase agreements or energy service agreements.
Yeah, thank you so much for that bit of context. So just building off that, let's jump in. In your view, how do recent legislation and policy changes impact the investment case for renewable and distributed generation?
Sure. I mean, in my mind, it underscores the importance of distributed generation. So I'm not going to repeat all of the things that happened with the demise of the Inflation Reduction Act, but we know that global energy demands are supposed to increase by 50 to 100% by 2050 per the Energy Information Administration, and industrial heat demands are projected to increase by 3.5 times by 2050. That comes from Roland Berger. There's so much requirement for distributed generation, generating electricity where you need it. There are tons of statistics about how woefully unprepared we are for brownouts and blackouts because of transmission and distribution constraints. I'm positive that the current administration will try to blame renewables, as will lots of other folks. And, it's important to see that and explain that generating electricity where you use it is something that's really important. I think that the concept of ESG is not nearly as important as it was before, but data center electrification is increasing power demand and could be the forcing function for the rapid deployment of clean, firm power, storage, and grid innovation.
Yeah, thank you. What market fundamentals make these areas of investment so attractive or resilient?
What we are seeing is a huge rise in utility rates. Depending on the state that you're in and the utility that you're in, utility rates could rise 20, 30, 40% in the next year, and certainly in the next 5 years. The data center boom is creating a huge increase in demand for electricity, doubling today's data center energy use. So the most recent statistic I've seen from S&P Global is that data centers proliferating across the US will require 22% more grid power by the end of 25 than they did just 1 year earlier, and will need 3 times as much energy in 2030, which is pretty astounding, that exponential growth. And with that exponential growth, we are not seeing an equal increase in supply. So that is a market fundamental that is creating lots of innovation and lots of ideas around distributed energy resources, about how we use our energy, about demand response. So it's a very exciting, innovative time in the energy space. We're also seeing technology improvements that are driving down costs, and those are economic certainties, right? So we've seen that storage from 2019 to 2024 in California alone has gone up by a factor of 10. And in so doing, we're seeing much more battery storage technologies that are incredibly are much more efficient than anything that we've ever seen before. So those two market fundamentals, utility rates rising and technology improvements, um, are wonderful for our industry in that, you know, higher utility rates will be pushed down to ratepayers. Ratepayers are going to finally be paying attention to this. It drives the value proposition for distributed generation. Meanwhile, we also have to emphasize the resiliency and energy security part of this story. The Trump administration is calling it energy dominance, and it's the concept of we want to be self-sufficient. We don't want to be importing oil from the Middle East. So energy independence goes hand in glove with distributed generation, while batteries help to shave peaks and stabilize the grid. The Inflation Reduction Act has definitely changed how solar and storage work, and policies have changed how solar and storage work. So the net energy metering 3.0 program in California, in fact, requires that if you're installing solar in California after April of 2026, you must also install storage. So there's lots of policy changes which are forcing changes on the investor side. On the investor side, we at Sunrock are getting tax equity and we're getting sponsor equity. Our sponsor equity currently comes from Clean Capital, and we're talking to lots of other folks about that. But we're able to financially manage how a solar plus storage project is developed. We're able to underwrite entities that don't have a credit rating, and then we're able to fund those projects in a really creative project finance way so that we can get our off-takers who are buying electricity via an energy service agreement and provide them with demand reductions in a way that is easy to finance and replicable.
Appreciate you clarifying that. So you mentioned a few sort of briefly, but do any sectors or subsectors sort of stand out as winners in this? And how are developers and institutional investors shifting focus to capture some of these opportunities?
So for sure, there's a ton of really interesting work going on with distributed energy resources and demand charge management. So should you be turning off and on your electric vehicle during certain times of day? When is the best time? I mean, you already are seeing time of use rates in states like California, where most people who are using large amounts of energy know that they should be reducing their energy use from 4 to 9 p.m. You're seeing in the PJM, the Regional Transmission Organization, that PJM is literally giving people $100,000 for every megawatt that they turn off their electricity during a certain number of peak run hours. You're seeing that coal-fired power plants simply don't make any sense anymore. There was a recent coal-fired power plant for sale, and literally no one wanted to buy it, which is just fascinating to me. So there's a ton of interest in what we're calling virtual power plant platforms that aggregate a bunch of small scale storage and flexible demand across a bunch of different sites and turn them into coordinated energy assets. So, to be honest, while we're disappointed that energy prices are going up exponentially, it's neither surprising uh, nor is it something that investors shouldn't be excited about, in the sense that there is a plethora of new technologies coming out with predictive analytics, time of use optimization, dynamic control companies that automatically decide when to use, store, or export their solar energy and their battery storage. All of those things reduce energy bills, limit curtailment, can open new revenue streams, especially in regions with dynamic pricing or feed-in tariffs.
Talking about financing models, are there any
Yes.
innovative ones that are sort of stepping in to fill the gap left by the phase out of the tax credits?
So yes, absolutely. What we do at Sunrock Distributed Generation is we provide power purchase agreements and energy service agreements to off-takers via our developer partners. So there's tons of innovation just in the operations of developing a project. So we're trying to make the process faster to develop a project. That's possible with AI and a number of other things that are just making it much easier to process the development of a project. And then similarly, we're seeing a huge shift in how tax equity works, because the federal tax credit historically has been such a big part of investing in solar. And there's been a lot of innovation on the tax equity side and frankly, the project equity side to try to figure out how to be most efficient with the solar and storage financing that we're working with.
Yeah, thank you for touching on that. So obviously there's a lot of moving parts in terms of this topic. What is your sort of outlook for the future regarding the market maturing, ESG, as we mentioned, being prioritized, and
Yep.
sort of investment opportunities in the renewable space broadly?
I honestly think that ESG has been deprioritized. I think it is much more about affordability, and you see that as evidenced by the November 2025 elections. People in New Jersey, people in Virginia, they're worried about their utility bill rates, as they should be. Utility rates are going up exponentially. And the utilities that we have right now are literally not set up to provide the energy supply that is required to meet this huge increase in demand. And so there are going to have to be innovations. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is going to have to work with the independent service operators. The utilities, sort of kicking and screaming, are going to have to think through some of these technology improvements. A lot of them are providing pilot programs, which is wonderful. But when you think about the incentive structure of a utility, it is, whether you're talking about the regulated side or the unregulated side, their job is either to transmit electricity to you and me, or it is to sell kilowatt hours. So having a big solar power plant with storage is not something that they want to see. They want to build their new nuclear power plants. They want to get a bunch of ratepayers to pay for new transmission and distribution grid lines. They're not incentive to be creative or innovative. Now, some of them are doing interesting pilots, and some of them really have been creative. Every utility is its own special snowflake. Sort of in general, they're neither providing the place for technology improvements to support them, nor are they being creative about what to do with these rising utility rates because of such high increases in demand. And we really fundamentally think that the distributed energy resource world is going to solve that problem. We could even go so far as saying at some point utilities will become much less necessary because a lot of these data centers are simply building their own turbines in what we call behind the meter. So they're not even connecting to the grid. They're getting their own solar and storage without even working with utilities. And I foresee a time when when a lot of these big data centers aren't even connected to the utilities because it becomes too complicated for them to actually get their energy at the time when they want it.